Welcome to an evening in Vancouver with Kathy Baldock, Executive Director of Canyon Walker Connections. This is Lisa Salazar, and it was my privilege to interview Kathy on December 5th, 2012, when she visited Lighthouse of Hope Christian Fellowship in Vancouver. Sit back and enjoy the wonderful conversation that ensued. And so, without further ado, I'd like to first of all introduce Kathy to you. I've already explained how we met and all that, but Kathy has ministry, or her blog is called Canyon Walker Connections. And the first question I have for Kathy is, how in the world did you come up with a name like Canyon Walker Connections?
Hello, first of all, hello. For years, I'm a hiker. I live in the road between Reno and Lake Tahoe. So you think you live in a beautiful spot? I live in a more beautiful spot. And it's sunnier. And I've been hiking for years, probably about 2 decades, between these canyons, truly canyons, and there's a creek that runs down it. And I've just been hiking there for a long time, and it's a place that I call my sacred space. I pray in there, I think in there, I listen to podcasts. I let people hike with me sometimes because I really protect that place. But when it came time to even just find a screen name for myself, when my daughter wanted me to get onto AOL Mail, back in whatever year that would have been, and I refused to, I kept telling her, no, I don't want to be online, I don't want a cell phone, I don't want any of this stuff. So she was 12 at the time, she was 25, so it was 13 years ago. She pushed me, and she said, let's find out what you do, Mom. So I said, well, I walk in the canyons every day, so that started Canyon Walker. But then as my life started to unfold, I realized that it was really a prophetic picture of what I'd end up doing. And I say that I walk between the two places, the Christian church and the gay Christian church. And I try to walk right down the center of those two dialogues and groups of people. I mean, sure, I drift up on the sides. And, I very much dwell within the gay Christian community. But I try to be a bridge between them. And I'm actually writing a book, and the working title of it is it's Walking the Bridgeless Canyon. Because when I started, I had no role models. I mean, it was only 7 or 8 years ago, but there were no role models doing what I was doing. I mean, there were some people doing bridge building, but it wasn't the way that I was hearing God tell me that it was going to be happening. I didn't know what it was, but he told me, it's going to be unique and it's going to be new, so just do it. So when I came to look for a ministry name, Canyon Walker happened. I have no idea why connections happen, but it ends up being very much of what I do. I connect kids to mentors, and kids to sites, and parents to information, and pastors to information, and people to churches, and people to each other. So it works. So a lot of times people don't even know my name, but the other day we went to visit a pastor in North Vancouver, and we walked in and we said hello to her, and she just turned to me and she said, "You're a Canyon Walker." It's like, I am. Yes, I am. That's me.
Okay, well, I guess one of the, before we get too far into your ministry and all that, we want to know a little bit more about you personally. And I know that you grew up in New York, that you attended Rutgers University, and Rutgers?
Rutgers.
Mm-hmm. And you studied civil engineering.
Yes.
Why and how did you get into civil engineering?
Yeah. I was always kind of the smart girl in high school, and I did a lot of the boys. I was just gifted at science and math. So, I was in the classes with all the boys all the time, and so I went to college. I went to Rutgers, and they just started letting women in 4 years before I got there. And so when I got there, I was actually, who knows? I mean, what does a physics major do with their life? But that's what I started out as, this physics major. And one of the boys I was dating, there were several, but one of the boys I was dating, he was an engineer, and he didn't appear to be much smarter than me at all. So he kept telling me, he was going to get out of college and he was going to make tons of money, and I was going to be in grad school, and then I was going to have to go get my master's, and that didn't resonate with me. So I thought, well, if he can do it, maybe I can do it. So I rode my bicycle up to the engineering school, and I changed my major to engineering, and that's why I went to engineering school, because it, was math and science, and I figured I could get a job afterwards, and there were lots of men in the field.
I think her answer also.
Oh, I'm heterosexual.
Yeah, but her answer also reveals an interesting streak that runs very strongly through Kathy, and that's the competitive streak.
Yeah, it's good.
And so we won't talk about scarves tonight.
Yeah, well, you may win tonight.
Well, a follow-up question to that. So you studied, you graduated. How did you end up in Reno?
I stayed back in New Jersey for a little while. I worked on, at the time, it's part of my resume, I worked as an engineer on the biggest wastewater treatment plant in the world. Oh, it's so impressive. Who cares about that
Sewage.
stuff? Sewage, wastewater treatment, that's what but then I say to people, my major helps me out now, because what I did was bridge design and wastewater treatment, so I say I still build bridges and I deal with people's crap every day. So it worked. So I stayed back for a year, and my boyfriend at the time moved to Seattle to work with Boeing. So that's how I got to Seattle, and then the engineering firm I worked for got a master plan project in Reno, and so I commuted for a while back and forth to Reno until it passed, and when it passed, I moved really close to where I live now in Reno, and I'm a native New Yorker. I'm from New York City, and it's one of those things I thought, this is one of those times God really made a mistake. He should have made me born in mountains. It was it delayed by 25 years, but I eventually got there, and I haven't left. I haven't left Washoe County, Reno, Nevada, since moving there in, I think, 81. I'm very happy in Reno. So so that's how I got to Reno. I just moved down there for an engineering project, and I didn't marry that boy, I married another boy, so.
Going back to Canyon Walker Connections, or the Canyon, something significant happened in one of your hikes. And you met a person, her name is Netto. Can you tell us about her? Why was that event pivotal, and what happened next?
Well, I became a Christian at the age of 28. And I slotted very quickly into the Evangelical Church. It just resonated with me. And my husband and I got saved the same moment. I was raised a Catholic, and he was Church of England. He's a British native. And we got saved at the same moment. And the reason I started going to church, and it all becomes part of my personality, is I was just used to, my personality, I was just used to succeeding. And my marriage started falling apart within a year. That was not good. And some Christians were alongside of me, and they said, maybe you should start going to church. And I thought, if God knew me, if there was a God, and if he knew me better than I did, maybe he could control this marriage and get it together, that I couldn't get together at all. And so I became a Christian at the age of, I think, 27. But by year 7, there were pretty severe problems in my marriage. There were some mental health issues, and I hung in there. And at about year 20, it was pretty evident, after an affair and some other issues, that my marriage was over. And that was devastating to me, because I had always thought, this is the way I ran my life. I'm a compulsive list maker. This book is full of lists. I take notes on everything. And I had always thought that if you did A and B and C, you would get D. It would happen. And for the first time in my life, it was falling apart. And I didn't understand how to deal with that. So part of my way of coping was hiking. But it was also really instrumental that I was in that position of not knowing. Because I had been a Bible study leader at church, a women's leader, I started up ministries. It all just always flowed for me. And then the thing I wanted most was just falling apart. So I wasn't in doubt about God, but I was in doubt about what I knew. All the answers I thought I knew were suddenly not so sure to me, and that was important. Because on one of my hikes, I kept running into this woman named Netto, and we keep joking that I should just have a fold out of her and say, here she is, and just bring her along on trips. But she couldn't be more different than me. She's a woman of color. She's brown. She's a Native American, First Nations here, Native American. She was born in New Mexico on a pueblo, Hispanic last name, a lesbian, and an agnostic. So she wasn't in my tribe at all. And I really just hung around evangelical Christians, straight women, married women. I mean, I've got the pedigree that I even homeschooled my children. So, you know, those really conservative fundamentalists, like that try to insulate their children from the world, I was one of them too. But my children turned out okay, so that's good. So I was hiking along these trails, and I kept running into Netto, and eventually I had extra time one day. And I got to the bottom of the trail, and I said to her, I've got extra time today. Can I turn around and walk with you for a while? I mean, it's 20 years later. I'm still walking with her. 12 years later. And so I walked with Netto, and I realized in conversation she wasn't saying any of the key words that my friends say, like husband and children, and she just was not very open about those relationships in her life. And when I got to the bottom of the trail, when we walked back to her truck, she had a metal ring, a rainbow ring of colors on her truck, and I mean, in my head I was going like, oh my God, I think she's a lesbian. Like, what do I do with this? And so I, quickly told my girlfriends, I think, because we started hiking together, I think I'm hiking with a lesbian. And she still didn't come out to me, and she knew I was a Christian, and she didn't want to come out to me because she thought I'd just walk out of her life. And we were compatible in hiking styles and speed, and I finally found a hiking partner that was a great hiking partner. And I just started to accept that she was probably gay, but as the year progressed, I loved her. And that was the key, that I just started loving this woman, just for exactly who she was. And everything inside of me, that evangelism gift, it just started to seed. And I just didn't have this compulsion to tell her anything, because in my mind, the steps that I had taken to keep my life together, they weren't working for me either. So how was I going to tell this woman to stop loving women and to do life my way, because my life wasn't working out either? So it kept my mouth shut from saying all the wrong and offensive things. But then Netto, when she came out to me a year later, she came out to me because her former partner had died, and she was struggling as an agnostic with what do I do with death and what happens after death. So she came out to me, and all I did was just put my arm around the small of her back, and I just really said to her, she said, I've got something to tell you. And she said, I'm a lesbian. And I said, is that the best you've got? Because I loved her. And so then she started bringing me into her circles. And I was also taking Italian class at the time, so there were a couple of gay men in there too. So I started meeting gay men and gay women, and started going to their social events, but it took more than 5 years for me to ever run into a gay Christian. So while I was learning that gay people, these are very basic things, but you've got to see me as pretty typical. I did not, as much as I knew, and I was pretty educated and pretty social, I still did not know that being gay was not a choice when I met Netto. I just didn't know that. I had been told it was a choice, and I had also been told the relationships were based on lust and not love, and I believed those things. So in the 5 years being around people, I saw very long-term relationships, and I heard the stories of people telling me that they always knew they were gay, and that played pretty deeply in me. But 5 years to finally convince me. And then it didn't make sense to me. I mean, it was a very simple thing. How can I tell them about this invisible God when to believe in this invisible God, but first to do that, they have to let go of the tangible, visible love in their lives. To tell you to end your relationship so that I could introduce you to God. It just didn't make sense to me. So it started me questioning what I believed. And can I say how I made the next step?
Sure.
Or can I go there? So in December of 2006, I happened to be reading the New York Times. Now, I had never put the words gay and Christian before together ever because they didn't make sense. I had done plenty of offending of my this is a funny story. So the year before, a couple of years before that, in 2004, when 19 American states had the marriage ballot of some sort on their ballots, civil unions or some kind of equality or some kind of inclusion of discrimination. One of my friends, she was running for family court judge in Reno, and I supported her as, she's a lesbian, first open lesbian running for family court judge. It was a pretty big deal. But she called me one night and asked me, she was about to make a decision for a future event, and would I support her? And I said, well, Myra, how can you ask me, will I support you? You got to tell me what you're doing. And she said she was going to be running for she said, well, what would you not support me in? And I said, well, and Gene Robinson had just been elected as Archbishop of the New Hampshire Diocese. And I said, and that was very fresh on my mind because I had just written a very poignant letter to the New York Times telling them that he should not be bishop because he was a gay man. And he had said he was a partner, so I assumed he was sexual as a gay man. And how could I expect a leader above me to not keep the laws of the Bible? So if you can only have sex inside a marriage, how could this man possibly be appointed a bishop? And that was in 2004. It was a very good letter to the New York Times, and thank you God that they never published it. I would be on record, but it was so good it should have been published, but it didn't get published. So that was very fresh on my mind when Myra called me, and she said, well, what would you not support me in? So I just went into this very articulate, if you ran for bishop of the Episcopal Church, I wouldn't support you. And I am talking to a 6'2" lesbian attorney who's gone before the state Supreme Court in Nevada. She is capable of an argument, and I got into the wrong argument with her. And she taught me a lesson. She's a Buddhist, and she taught me a lesson in the next few months because I really thought by telling the truth and telling the truth as I saw it in the Bible was the right thing to do. And I had just deeply, I had just deeply wounded another friend that I loved with my arrogance, and I didn't even get it. I didn't even get it because I was right. I was right, and I was supporting God's truth, and it took her months to call me back, and she did the right thing. She did the brave thing, and she forgave me. I didn't even know I had done something wrong. That's how arrogant I was. And we had our regular Christmas dinner, and over Christmas dinner, she laid it out on the table about how offensive I was. And she taught me a big lesson. And so I remember the election coming around in 2004, and it was the first time, instead of just feeling sorry for my friends, when they started announcing the election results on the TV, I remember the man I was dating at the time, he was pretty happy that America had done the right thing. And he said, as the election results came in, he said, well, it's a good thing they did that because now, they are against the American family, gay people. And it was the first time I really heard that kind of discrimination. It just hadn't dawned on me that it was happening. And I went to him, and I honestly felt that night, it was another pivotal point for me because I felt like somebody had punched me in the throat. It was such an injustice. And I got pretty angry at him and went home and thought about it for 3 days. And I realized a shift had gone on in me because I started seeing gay people as real people and that they really were discriminated against. So through this whole journey, it was not Christians teaching me anything. It was agnostic lesbians and atheist lesbians. I mean, just picture this. There's this really self-righteous evangelical Christian learning all these really deep lessons about pride and arrogance from non-Christians. And so here I am in 2006, still have not met a gay Christian. And I read this article in the New York Times, and it's Justin Lee, who's the head of the Gay Christian Network, author of that book there. And he had been interviewed on the front page of the New York Times, and I read this article, and he was the quote of the day. And when I saw the words gay Christian attached to each other, this is 2006, it never dawned on me that those words were associated. Never. So I went to the website for the Gay Christian Network, and I was sure that I would not agree with that mission statement. I was headed for that mission statement. I was going there. So I went to the mission statement, and I was expecting. Here's what I was expecting. Jesus, gay, anal sex, Jesus, God, gay, lesbian, Jesus, sex, discrimination, diversity, Jesus. You know, I kind of thought it would all be in there, and totally knew that it would be slanted towards this sexual issue. I was shocked when I read the mission statement, and I completely agreed with me. That stunned me. And then the next week I went to church, and my pastor was talking about the other. He wasn't talking about the gay other, he was just talking about the other. I cried through the sermon, and I thought about the website that I'd just gone to. And I recognized that they had a conference coming up in Seattle that year. So I sobbed through the entire the entire sermon, and then I walked up to my pastor afterwards, and he said, "Kind of noticed you were sitting on the front row crying." He said, "What's going on?" I said to him, "Do you know there are gay Christians?" He said, "So, Kathy, what should we do about this?" I said, "I want to go see them. There's a conference. I want to go to Seattle and see them. And as my pastor, I was single by then, I just want your blessing." So my church actually, my pastor was going through some questioning of different issues at the time, and he decided to sponsor both my registration and hotel. I'm from a non-affirming evangelical church, that's huge. And what he said to me was, "Kathy, there's a voice crying in the wilderness." He said, "I can't hear it." He said, "But I think you can hear it." So I called up Justin Lee the next day, tracked him down. I mean, Lisa knows by now, if I want you, I will find you. And if you send me a nasty note, so if there's someone on YouTube watching me, if you send me a nasty note, I will find you and I will write you a letter using your name and your city of origin. Getting better at it, right? Is that true?
That's true.
That's true.
She showed me how to do it too.
I did. I mean, that's just as a diversion to that. I get a lot of really bad mail. And so...
We can talk about it.
Okay. I won't talk about my bad mail. So I went to the Gay Christian Conference. I called Justin and asked him, could I come? I wasn't trying to change anybody. And he said, sure. You know, Justin's fabulous, right? He's fabulous. So I was the first straight Christian that showed up. And that night, the very first night of worship, at that time there were maybe 300 gay Christians in the room, and it was dark, and I walked and I stood in the back, and I thought, I'm probably going to see something that not many people get to see, so I'm going to stand in the back and I'm just going to observe and watch. And as soon as the worship started, that was it. It was immediately 2 feet in, because I realized that the Spirit of God that was in me was resonating in these people, in me, and I just thought, I have been so wrong. And I laid on the back on the floor, and I just started crying because I didn't know what to do with it. I mean, it was going to wreck my point of view. It was going to wreck a lot of things, and I thought, oh my God, what do I do with this information? So I started hanging out with gay Christians. So.
Otto's getting some Kleenex.
Oh, I might cry. The gay community makes me cry.
Well, GCN sort of a related question to GC, and I'm glad you brought that up, is you've immersed yourself in trying to understand the ex-gay movement.
Oh, yes,
and
I
you have
am.
people on your board that came out of the ex-gay movement.
Yes, I do.
Darlene and Michael Bussey, for example.
Mhm.
Darlene. Anyway, tell us about your experience just in immersing yourself in the ex-gay movement.
Well, and even right now, I'm working with an organization that I won't name, but it's a campus Christian ministry, and through a personal connection, through hiking. This young woman used to, thank you very much, this young woman used to live in Reno, and I officiated at a wedding last year in February, and she came to the wedding, and she was a leader of a campus ministry, and she liked what she was hearing, she liked what she was seeing, so she asked to hike with me, and I started hiking with her, and it became a mentoring relationship to bring her to fully affirming position, because she ended up within months being promoted to the headquarters of that organization, and now she's starting to make ripples in their questioning. And the main question that organization has that's holding them back is they're kind of getting that gay people are born gay, and they might even be able to be Christians, but a pretty popular stance is that they want you to change your orientation if you can, or to be celibate. So a lot of the ministries, the Christian ministries, the conservative Christian ministries, are looking to the reparative therapy, the ex-gay ministries, to help them. So what churches are doing, obviously, is a lot of churches don't have ex-gay ministries within them, so they source their gay people out, They send them off to the well-known ex-gay ministries, either locally, or they go to Exodus, which was formed in 1976, and they go to Exodus, which is an umbrella reparative therapy ministry organization that until last year had about 330 member organizations, and they try to get references of, where am I going to send my gay people in my church, because I don't know how to handle them. So that is their go-to solution. How are we going to fix the gay community? So can I talk about Alan Chambers now? Or
Yeah,
that, okay.
I was actually
Okay.
going to ask you a question about Alan Chambers.
So last year at the GCN conference, Alan Chambers and a few other people were on a panel before 400 plus gay Christians, and Alan Chambers, who's the president of Exodus International for 7 or 8 years, admitted that gay and trans people can be, he didn't say trans.
No, he didn't say
No, he didn't say trans. Nobody says trans. So I'm going to say trans. Gay people can be Christians, and he had not seen 99.9% of the people that are the motivated bunch that had come through Exodus had not changed orientation. Oh, the ripples it caused in the reparative therapy world. We were all cheering, rah, rah, rah. He got discredited. And as he became more graceful, I would call it, there were some member ministries that were not happy. And they started seeding from Exodus right away, and they formed another more militant ex-gay therapy group called Restored Hope Network. And because I'm trying to stay on top of what they're doing, because so many pastors, when I talk to them, they'll say, well, we just want to send our gay people to ex-gay therapy groups, reparative therapy groups. I feel like I have to know what's going on in those groups so I can say to those pastors, no. And so in September, I went to 2 days of the Restored Hope Network's conference, their first inaugural conference. They had seeded from Exodus. So they're the ones now on the edge, and they are grabbing member ministries from Exodus, because as Exodus moves towards grace, they're trying to grab these people back to the celibate or change orientation position. So we were all so excited when Alan was admitting last year that it never happened, and then these people rise right up. And I think they're going to become strong again, because I think there's going to be a large backlash of more conservatism for the next 2 years. I mean, I hate to say that, but I think it's going to happen. And it's so these people are going to have some clout. So I went to listen to them, and I mean, I would have rather sat for 12 hours and poked pins in my eyes. It was just so frustrating to listen to testimonies from the stage of people whose lives I knew from other people were not at all in order. And they were saying, you know, to mixed orientation couples, of which there were probably 40% of the people there, this works. And I'm looking at her, and I know her own life isn't working, and her husband's left her, and they're still standing up there saying these lies. So I try to go in there and find out what they're really saying. So, and yes, Michael Bussey, who's on my board, he was one of the founders of Exodus in 1973 when it was Exit. So I have a really good working knowledge of Exodus. And Darlene Bogle, who's one of my closest friends, she was an Exodus leader for 15 years too. And so I've got some good people around me that tell me what's going on and the realities of stuff. And even last night, sat and listened to a young man's story again, who had been through 5 years of reparative therapy with NARTH, you know, National Association Against Reparative Therapy for Homosexuality, or whatever they are. It's just, you know, it's all wrong. But so I try to stay up on these things, because I get to be the person that speaks to pastors and parents about the fallacy of these groups. So I keep my thumb on the pulse.
And that segues into nicely into the next question, because the fact is that your full-time job really has become to be in communication with people.
Mm-hmm.
And so what kind of people do you engage? Because I'm sure you don't engage everybody who writes you, who calls you. Who do you engage?
Well, the gamut is pretty wide. I say the ministry of Canyon Walker Connection is to encourage, to educate, and to engage. And the encouragement part comes from the gay Christian community. I have a lot of young gay and trans youth that contact me, and it's pretty devastating. I get a lot of mail that's kids right on the edge, kids that there's just no hope. There's just no hope for them anymore. So I get those kids, and what I generally do with them is, I love on them, virtually love on them, and with them I quickly connect them to Gay Christian Network, very quickly. I find out where they live, but they tell me. I don't have to hunt them down. They'll tell me where they live, and then I'll try to hook them up with mentors that I trust, you know, older gay Christians that are in nice, stable lives, or that will just be good friends to them. And I also go then to welcomingchurches.org, and I try to find churches for them in the area. And if I know a lot of pastors, I seem to travel a lot, I know a lot of pastors in different areas that I know, and I know their styles, and I'll hook kids into those communities, or I'll suggest online communities, church worship services that are archived that people can go to church when they can't go to church. So I get gay kids, I get their parents. A lot of kids will come out to their parents, and they'll ask me beforehand, can I hand my mom your phone number? Yes. So I talk to a lot of parents. I get into conversations with pastors who know they have to shift, pastors who know that I'm wrong, people that just find my stuff, realize my communication, my reach is effective, and they want to tell me how wrong I am. And I've even sat with people in hate groups to try to have conversations, and that's interesting, to know how to have conversations with those people. There's certainly ways to do it, and there's certainly completely unproductive ways to have conversations. So it's everything. It's really from a gay kid to a hate group, but I don't engage them all to ad nauseum. I mean, I know when to stop. I protect my time very well.
Now, something that's really interesting about you, Kathy, is in Canada, the word evangelical doesn't have very good PR. And I'm sure maybe to some extent in the United States. So a lot of evangelical Christians shy away from advertising the fact that they're evangelical. And people who are outside of the church, there's a lot of derision directed towards evangelicals. But you are unapologetic about calling yourself an evangelical Christian woman.
Are you asking me to confess that I'm evangelical? Are you asking me to apologize?
Yeah, yes, you can apologize.
I would love to apologize, but I can't.
I just want to know why it's important for you to do that.
It's important for me. It's important. It's important to me to look like the people I'm trying to talk to. And I get very frustrated with the extreme of the evangelical church. I get very frustrated, sometimes even with the people in my own congregation. But I have to stay there because I have to keep I'm comfortable with the style of worship, I'm comfortable with the style of study, I'm comfortable with a lot of the theology, but I have to stay with that label. I mean, sometimes I'd like to say I'm non-denominational. I mean, I really, really, really want to say sometimes I'm a Methodist. They're very attractive to me. I really like the Methodists. Their social justice programs. But I can't I can't become a Methodist because a Methodist cannot go knock on the doors of an evangelical pastor's office and say, "Hi, I'm a Methodist, and I'm here to talk to you about your theology." It doesn't work. It barely works for me to do it. You know, as a woman, you see, there's the other joke. You know, why would God use a woman to knock on the doors of pastors too? Because there is a connection between if they have problems with women, they will have problems with gays. If they have problems with gays, they may well have problems with women. And nobody's particularly thrilled to be told anything by a woman. But part of the trick and the knack is, I mean, the smile. I mean, I can have a killer smile when I want to, and it just looks like, oh my goodness, she looks so friendly. What harm could she do? So they'll let me in the doors, and I know what I'm talking about. I've heard all the stories. So in some respects, being a woman is a detriment, but in other respects, it's very disarming too. But yeah, I'm going to stay an evangelical. I'm going to reform the church.
And in your blog, you've often expressed sadness and at the contempt and some of the comments that you get, and from fundamentalist evangelical conservative Christians, and you've probably have received thousands of emails that attack you personally. How do you deal with those attacks, and what price have you paid personally for your advocacy and your activism?
First, the price. I hardly ever write about this stuff because I've paid a very high price. I used to be one of those people that could go into every church and I knew everybody and people knew me and it was, oh, there she is, hi. And now it's like my phone doesn't ring. And I lost some very, very close friends. They're just not comfortable with me anymore because as some of those women went through divorces, because we evangelicals, we get divorced too. And that's because you're ruining marriage. So please stop ruining our marriages because we're ending up single. And so they were uncomfortable hanging around with me because everybody perceived that I was a lesbian. So if I'm a lesbian and they're hanging out with me, they too must be lesbians. So, you know, sexual orientation by association, that's a problem. And people just feeling uncomfortable. And I left a pretty lucrative career because advocacy started taking up a lot of my time, and I had very strong messages. I was telling you about some of them today. of God distinctly saying, when are you going to listen to me, girl? When are you going to go do what I told you to do? But the comments from people that I get in the mail, I'm beyond caring about that now. I had a guy last year who between October 26th and Thanksgiving morning did 20 videos about me on YouTube, ranging from 3 minutes to 18 minutes, and asking other people to join him in attacking me. And on YouTube, people hide. But I got him too. I won't tell you how I got him because it's a trick. But I got him shut down on his 3 stations on YouTube's and all his counts taken away and slammed that boy down. But when I get the letters, I know who to engage and who not to engage. And I think this might be a good place to suggest some of the ways to engage and not. When somebody sends me a really nasty letter, I can usually tell if it's going to go 2 to 3 times exchange. Sometimes it only goes 1. If I check out other places they've commented or other things they've said, if they have an obsession about commenting on gay videos, and it's just we are not going to have a good friendship. It's not going to last very long at all. And sometimes I'll just block them and take their comments down because I know there's no fruit in it. Why bother? And other people, I'll try a 2 to 3 time exchange. And when they start hitting the skids with inappropriate language, I really do tell people, and then tell people in person this too. I said, just because you choose to sit in a toilet doesn't mean I'm going to join you in the toilet. I'm just not going to do it. I'm a mature woman. I behave appropriately, and I do not have to have these conversations about sex with you. This is not about sex, so I'm not going to have these conversations. So I stop people pretty quickly, but I'm always kind. Always kind, even in my stopping these conversations. And I also know when to walk away from them when they get too heated. I can probably win on biblical knowledge, but I won't destroy a relationship over it. I just won't do it. So I'll walk away and I'll get called stupid and that I don't know anything. But do you have a question at some point where I can talk about how to engage people?
I do.
Okay, I'll wait then.
Okay.
I'll stop there. But I get lots of nasty mail, but I don't respond in kind. That's the big thing. And the other important thing is, I think if you read my blog, there's some really important points. I think I write in a tone that invites conversation and appropriate behavior and respect. And I can read someone's posts, and when you read the comments under those posts, how inappropriate they are and disrespectful, I think the post and how that original writer sets the tones of the comments. And very few times have I ever had to flag comments on my own blog from people that support. I mean, they even may be angry at the Christians I'm writing about, but they still respond politely because I set a tone in exchange of respect. And I'm not seeing a lot of that on the conservative fundamentalist side. I just don't see it. I see people inciting other people to horrible, disrespectful conversations. Terrible stuff.
In 2011, I had the privilege of going with Kathy to Charlotte, North Carolina, to attend the Pride event. Instead of me telling the story, can you explain why it is that we went and why this event turned out to be different from all the other Pride events that you had ever attended up to that point? Because you've gone to the San Francisco Pride.
Gone to lots.
You've gone
lots of Prides. I've gone to more Pride events than most gay people have gone to. I mean, that's the truth.
But what was different about this event that you?
Well, I started going to Pride events in, I think, 2007, and Freedom in Christ Evangelical Church in San Francisco has been very pivotal in my growth. When I first became an ally of the gay Christian community, there was a young man. Oh, maybe not so young. I'll call him young for his ego. He recognized right away that I had the potential to be something more than just a passerby. And he came along to me and he said, and I will get to the answer, I will. He came along to me and he said, you have the potential to be a spokesperson for us, but you don't know anything. So keep your mouth shut for a long time. Just come and live amongst us. So he had me just listen and just start joining them in events, in barbecues, in church events. So I started going down to San Francisco quite often. It's 4 hours from me. And I would go down there and join them. And of course, then when Gay Pride came around, I worked the booth with them. And I rode on the float with them down Market Street. 1.2 million people go to San Francisco Gay Pride. And I was in my rainbow-colored choir robe and singing, techno-pop praise songs, and that was fun. But the day before I left for that, I thought, there's got to be just like something more I can do as a straight person. And I was hiking the day before I left, and sure, I got the firm message of make this t-shirt. And I came home and I stamped it. Because I was a homeschooling mom, so I had all those crafts in my schoolroom. And I found a white t-shirt and I just started stamping on it, hurt by church, get a straight apology here. And I started to get known for that. I would go to San Francisco Pride and do it, and I would not stand behind the booth. I would walk throughout the Pride event. It's a very intimidating thing to do because I had it on the front and back and there was no way to cover it up. And it was honestly, I felt more naked than the naked people because and there's a lot of naked people at San Francisco Pride. And it just feels very exposing. And so I started going to more and more Pride events to do that. And in that year, 2011, I had reviewed a book that's become sort of the anti-gay Christian Bible in the country, in the very fundamentalist conservative family groups and churches, by a man named Michael Brown, called A Queer Thing Happened to America, 700-page book. I actually even talked him into sending me a comp copy so I could review it. And I reviewed it, and I did a very appropriate review, but it didn't settle well with him. He was not happy with it. And he lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he had planned that year on amassing 500 worshipers, prayers, dancers, prayer warriors, and I don't know, circus clowns, I don't know, to march onto Gay Pride with t-shirts that said, God has a better way. He was organizing 500 Christians to walk into a Gay Pride event with a t-shirt on that said, God has a better way. So I wrote his mission statement, everything off of their website that they were planning on doing, and I put it out for a 36-hour comment on Facebook and on my blog, and I said, so this guy's intention is to do this. This is the heart. This is his heart. He's in there to show compassion and to tell you the truth. How would you respond to this? And I got 156 comments. So I published those comments, and I wrote back kind of an open letter to him and his 500 worshipers, prayers, dancers, and said, okay, I get it, that this is your intention of going to Gay Pride, to reach out in compassion and be love and tell people truth and save them for the kingdom, all those good things, but this is what they feel. So what are you going to do about this? So I thought that was the end of my job. And then pretty strongly I heard the message that you're going. And it was right when Lisa's on my board too, and it was right when we were having a board meeting, and I asked for donations, and I said if I get enough donations, I'm dragging Lisa with me, because Lisa had quite a long exchange. Very thoughtful on Lisa's part, very non-thoughtful on the other part. So we went to Gay Pride in Charlotte Pride to stand against the Christians and to extend love to the gay community. And it ended up turning the way I started approaching prides around, because I had never tried to engage or seen that level of disrespect from the street preachers. I had kind of ignored them before. But the South has a particular brand of them. And the ones in Charlotte, we've heard from people that travel pride to pride, are particularly
vile.
They're vile.
Yeah.
They're vile people. So it ended up that I stood in front of them the whole day and took their crap from behind me, but it changed the way I interacted with the crowd, because then I started standing in front of them and handing out Christian plus gay equal okay stickers and information of where they could find affirming churches, where they can find reconciliation of the verses. And then this year, so we did that, and it was pretty effective, but the street preachers still had free reign. So I thought about it again this year, and I'm sure, you know how it is when you kind of flow with God. You don't know where you start and he stops, because you start talking together, and all of a sudden this great idea comes out that you never had. So you know it's him, but you don't know where it came from. So it's just one of these things flowed in my head one day, and I was like, why don't you get some people to stand with you this year? So I put out a request, and I ended up at Pride Charlotte this year in August with 31 people. And we all stood with either Christian plus gay equals okay shirts or get a straight apology here shirts. And we kind of entered as a flash mob. I walked out in front of the street preachers, got yacked at by them. Oh, there she is again, blah, 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 whatever. And then worship leaders came out, and we came out of the crowd, and we just stood as a line in front of the street preachers, and we sang songs, and we engaged people, and it just changed. It changed the model of what I see it needs to be now, because it's not just about walking around and bumping into, engaging, encountering an occasional person that wants to talk to you. It's now doing visibly and audibly the right things we shut those street preachers down. They had no voice in Charlotte. It was fabulous because they are mean. We shut them down. You can see them in the background in pictures, like texting people, like, what do we do now? Or just like they're just standing there holding their signs that can't even be heard anymore. And so not only shutting them down, but being just as loud and strong a voice to love on the gay community. And I'm sure a lot of you are in churches where you go to gay pride events and you stand behind booths and you hope that people will walk up to you. I'm telling you that gay people are sometimes afraid to walk up to those booths. And I would love to see the model change. I would love to see Christians audibly out there doing the right things and engaging the gay community without, yes, bring them to your church, but send them to sites that can help them reconcile their orientation. These are the questions. These are the questions they have. Does God really love me? How can I reconcile these verses? And is there a church that will accept me? And the most beautiful moments I have are with kids that walk up to me. Well, I'll tell you the story of one young lady. Lisa was there last year when she first came up. She walked up to me and she said, I'm pretty well known on YouTube. Kids know me on YouTube. Adults know me on my blog. And she walked up to me and she came running from across, a street, and she said, "The straight apology lady is here. The straight apology lady is here. I can't believe you came to Charlotte." I said, "Yeah, I'm here in Charlotte." So she started talking to me, and she went and she brought back a few of her girlfriends, and they're all crowded around, and the first thing I tell these kids, can I touch you? Can I do it to you? Okay, come over here. That's what we have. But then I have to cry at you. I look at these kids and they let me touch them, which I think is amazing, that they let me touch them. You're going to cry too. So I touch them and I just say, "Do you know how beautiful you are? Do you know how beautiful God thinks you are? Do you know how much He loves you? Do you really know how much He loves you?" And it's just so pivotal in the life of a kid. And especially these little trans kids. Oh my goodness, I can spot them. I wish they would let me help spot them. But these kids don't know they're beautiful. So this one little girl that did that last year, I recognized her voice. She had a really gruff voice. I used her picture when I came back from Pride because it was so beautiful. And she came up this year, and she had her head pretty much shaven to a whatever, number 1, number 2. And she didn't look the same because she didn't have the same, the same style of dress on. She was a lot more bound. And, hey, straight apology lady, it's you again, do you remember me? And as soon as she opened her mouth, I recognized her voice. And I said to her, I started to do the same thing, and I went to reach for her, and I said, honey, do you realize how beautiful you are? And someone snapped a picture right at that moment. That is exactly the issue. This little girl, she just looked down to the side like she didn't want to hear it. She didn't even know how to hear it. She just didn't even know how to hear it. She didn't know how to hear that God loved her. And, that's what I want you guys to do. I want you to go out and love these kids. Tons of power in a straight person doing it. Tons of power in a mother type doing it. Tons of power in it. But there's a lot more in standing in front of the hate and so visibly loving on people. And that witness, as people walk by, it is so hard to deny. The year before last, I was standing there, and that was the year, God Has a Better Way people didn't come this year. I have my own suspicions. It was pretty intimidating for them to think that 30 people were going to be standing against them this year, so I don't think they wanted to show up. But last year, it was after they had all been given bottles of water and bracelets and things to hand out, and after about, they were supposed to be up there 2 hours to change the world, and then in 2 hours we'll all gather back here at First Methodist and we'll rah, 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 and we'll talk about all the gay people we sent to the kingdom. Yay, see you in 2 hours, yay. So off they go, wasn't it? Lisa and I watched the whole rally. When you look at their pictures, when they shoot out the rally, we're sitting on the steps right across the street from them listening to the whole thing. There's Lisa and Kathy. So there we are. So after about an hour and 15 minutes, they weren't handing out bottles of water or anything anymore. They had nothing left. So they were just standing in clumps, judging like crazy, huh?
Yeah, looking over their shoulders and just
And the pictures they were taking, by far, because we saw it on the website, were out of every 10 pictures, 7 of those pictures were of transgender people. And we could see them doing it. And so I just looked out, and it was just one of those moments in time where I honestly wish that somebody had a video camera on so I could have seen it. But I looked out, and I've given to sometimes, I guess when God has nobody else in the vicinity, he'll use me as a prophetic voice. He looks around and he says, oh my God, is there no one else here we can use but her? Okay. It's somebody step up. Gotta put it in her mouth. So I felt, I could feel the power of God rising up my legs. And I thought, oh my God, no, not here. This is crazy. I can tell people God loves them, but I'm not used to screaming it. And I could feel the power of God rising up my legs, and I just looked to take a snapshot to say, okay, Kathy, notice what is going on here. And I saw lots of red clumps of people. And hands go up, eyes shut, start screaming about Isaiah, and he's a God of equality and against injustice and against oppression, and you're beautiful. And then a crowd amassed around me, and they were screaming. And they were clapping and catcalling, and they were saying, that's the God we want. Think about this. That's the God we want. She's got the Jesus we want. That's the God we want. Clapping and hooting and hollering. That's the God. So then it stops. Yay, stops. Go back to normal.
That was an amazing thing to watch, because I was standing about 15 feet away, and the intensity of what was going on was just, you could feel it. And then Kathy she had this download. We call it a download, and it happened really quickly. It didn't last more than 10 or 15 seconds, what she said, but it was powerful. It was really powerful.
I mean, about 150 people just came right around, and then one of the kids grabbed me to talk to me, and I had a big backpack on my back with all my my gear to give away, my information, and she turned me so quickly, I thought I must have hit somebody with my bag. So I turned back to the spot that I had just vacated, and the man we had come to stand against, Michael Brown, was standing in my place. So he had seen the entire thing because he was right there. So he started saying, and he's 6'4", in a booming voice, "You want to know God? You want to know Jesus? I'll tell you about God. I'll tell you about Jesus. God has a better way." And it was just like the crowd dispersed like roaches in the light. It was just when they went, boom! Everybody went away.
Yeah, it's kind of like somebody, like he went up to the microphone and somebody turned off the microphone and nobody...
And then his voice kind of went... It was like so strange. It was so... Okay, sorry.
No,
I get carried away.
An Evening with Kathy Baldock, Executive Director of Canyon Walker Connections, was hosted by Lighthouse of Hope Christian Fellowship in Vancouver. When it comes to the dialogue between the church and the LGBT Christian community, Kathy has learned it is all about engaging in respectful relationships. When we see the love of Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit at work in the lives of LGBT persons, it should behoove us to ask the tough question in humility: do I have it right? To learn more about Kathy's work, please visit www.canyonwalkerconnections.com. It is full of available resources, stories, and links, including links to where you can find affirming churches in your area. I am Lisa Salazar, and on behalf of Canyon Walker Connections, may the love of Jesus rule in our hearts forever.